RMC Wild Moose, because this coaster was announced over 7 months ago and not a single Wild Moose has been built. But why? This coaster should in theory be selling really well. Well, there are 3 reasons why no one has bought an RMC Wild Moose. And be sure to stick around to the end because the last reason will shock you. So why is no one buying the RMC Wild Moose? Well, let's find out. Rocky Mountain Construction, or RMC, is known for their hybrid roller coasters. This is where they take an old and aging wooden coaster and add steel track to it and bring new life to a coaster. And these have been very successful for RMC. And people love them. They're smooth and tense, and they're way better than the old wooden coaster they replace. But these rides are not really built for families. They're definitely more intense, and they really are thrill coasters. But with the recent trend of theme parks adding more and more family coasters, RMC wanted to get in on the action. So on August 18th, 2023, RMC announced the Wild Moose. The Wild Moose would basically be a scaled down version of their hybrid coasters, made for families and younger kids. They were also meant to replace the traditional Wild Mouse coaster that is not exactly a great ride. So when RMC announced the Wild Moose, everyone thought it was going to sell and be really successful for RMC. We also all thought it would be a super big step up from a traditional Wild Mouse coaster. So think, it's more thrilling and a better family coaster, and it's probably going to cost the same amount of money as a traditional Wild Mouse. So we were all super excited. It looked like a bunch of parks would be getting brand new RMC Wild Mooses, which would be pretty darn awesome. But here we are 7 months later, and unfortunately RMC has yet to sell one of these, even though it's one of the best family coaster options out there. So let's figure out why no one is buying the RMC Wild Moose. Starting off with reason number 1. Most theme parks have recently gotten a family coaster. So as I mentioned earlier, a lot of theme parks want family coasters right now, which sounds great for the RMC Wild Moose because it is indeed a family coaster. But on the other hand, with the recent family coaster trend, a lot of parks already have gotten a family coaster in the last 5-ish years. Meaning that it's time for them to go with a thrill coaster or like a flat ride or something along those lines. Not another family coaster. Which in turn kind of puts the RMC Wild Moose at a bit of a disadvantage. Especially the larger parks that have already gotten family coasters, they're definitely not considering the Wild Moose. And then smaller to mid-tier size parks get investments less often. This all kind of culminates into less chances for RMC to sell the Wild Moose to a theme park. Because it really is probably not a very good time to have a brand new family coaster. And I think that this would have sold a lot better if this had come maybe 1 to 2 years earlier. Because then that would have opened up the market for a lot of larger parks and gotten the countdown for the smaller parks going quicker for them to get a Wild Moose. So to sum it all up, the Wild Moose is partially not selling because a lot of parks already have gotten their family coasters. But that is not all. Getting into reason number 2. The Wild Moose is technically still a prototype. So RMC has not yet sold a Wild Moose coaster, the premise for this entire video. Which means that first installation is going to be a prototype. And prototypes are known for having some issues. Now I'm not saying that necessarily the Wild Moose is going to have a ton of issues or anything, but when you are getting a prototype roller coaster, you are taking a bit more of a risk when you're building that coaster. And there are countless examples of prototype coasters not going exactly the way parks would hope so. And with everything getting more expensive, if a park spends like $2, $3, $5-ish million on a roller coaster, they want that to work and be really successful with as little issues as possible. But with a prototype attraction, the manufacturer cannot guarantee that. And many parks are on a bit of a tight budget when it comes to new investments. Meaning they much rather get a tried and true model that they know is going to work opposed to a prototype attraction. Now that doesn't mean that prototypes are necessarily a bad thing, it's just they are more risky than a model that has been proven and tested to be successful and reliable. So sure, the RMC Wild Moose is still a prototype. And sure, a lot of parks already have family coasters, but this looks really good on paper. Why is it not selling? Well, that brings us perfectly into reason number 3. And that is that theme parks really don't need this coaster. Hold on, let me explain. So the Wild Moose was built specifically to replace the traditional Wild Mouse. And when you step back and take a look, those Wild Mouse coasters are definitely starting to get up there in age. But we have one major problem, and that is that those Wild Mouses are still very popular. Meaning there is literally no reason for a park to spend extra money to get a Wild Moose because their Wild Mouse is just as popular. But why is that? Well, the target audience for the Wild Mouse coasters are like younger kids and families. And remember, not everyone who visits the theme park cares as much about roller coasters as you and I probably do. So if a park spends the money and gets a brand new Wild Moose, there's definitely a chance that they really don't know the difference. Meaning that the marketing for that new coaster is not nearly as strong. Now I know this sounds a little crazy. It's a new coaster that is objectively better than any old Wild Mouse. But think to the average theme park guest, they're both still family coasters that the whole family gets to enjoy. Whether it's a traditional Wild Mouse or the RMC Wild Moose. And a lot of parks, as I said earlier, they're trying to save as much money as possible. And if they're going to be pretty much identical in popularity, why would they spend the extra money to upgrade to an RMC Wild Moose? But what about the future of the RMC Wild Moose? Well, I feel like this coaster has a very bright future ahead of it. It really is a very solid coaster on paper, and knowing RMC, I'm sure it's super affordable. I just feel like once they get the prototype in, and if it does well and is reliable, I could definitely see a lot of parks jumping on this coaster and getting one for themselves. And that would be amazing, because you know RMCs deliver incredible ride experiences. And yes, I know the Wild Moose is a family coaster, but it could still be pretty good. And I'm super excited for the future of the Wild Moose, because I genuinely feel like it is going to be successful one day. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe down below and drop a like while you're at it, so you do not miss out on any videos coming your way. And if you want to know why Michigan's Adventure hasn't gotten a new coaster in 25 years, then check out the video on your screen right now. And as always, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.